Most people begin their year with a list of goals: more money, better health, a new job, a stronger body, a better life. And for a few weeks, maybe even a few months, they feel energized. They wake up early, they plan, they push. But then life happens. Fatigue shows up, doubt gets louder, distraction becomes easier than discipline, and slowly, quietly, the goals that once felt exciting start to feel heavy. This is not because people are weak. It is because most people start in the wrong place. They start with what they want, not why it matters. When the reason is shallow, the effort never lasts. Wanting a result is not the same as believing in a cause. Pressure can get you started, but only purpose can keep you going when motivation fades. And motivation always fades. The strongest people you will ever meet are not driven by excitement. They are driven by meaning. They do not wake up asking, "What do I feel like doing today?" They wake up asking, "What am I here to build?" Purpose is not a slogan. It is a compass. It gives direction when everything else feels uncertain. It turns effort into commitment. It turns struggle into something that feels worthwhile. Without purpose, discipline feels like punishment. With purpose, discipline feels like devotion. Most people live their lives reacting. They react to circumstances. They react to other people's expectations. They react to what society tells them success should look like. They chase titles, numbers, applause, and approval. And then one day, they look at their life and feel something they cannot explain, a quiet emptiness. Not because they failed, but because they succeeded at something that never truly belonged to them. That is what happens when you build a life on pressure instead of purpose. Pressure says, "You should do this." Purpose says, "I must do this." Pressure comes from the outside. Purpose comes from within. And only what comes from within will still be there when no one is watching, when no one is applauding, when no one is reminding you who you said you wanted to become. If you want to be unstoppable in 2026, you must begin with a deeper question than "What do I want?" You must ask, "Why does this matter to me? Why does this goal deserve your time? Why is this dream worth your energy? Why is this future more important than the comfort you could choose today?" When the why is clear, the how becomes possible. People often say they lack discipline, but what they really lack is a reason strong enough to demand it. You can force yourself to do something for a while, but you can only commit to something for a lifetime when it is connected to meaning. Think about the moments in your life when you did not quit. When you kept going, even though it was uncomfortable, even though it was hard, even though it would have been easier to walk away. In those moments, you were not driven by a result. You were driven by something deeper: responsibility, belief, identity, love, or purpose. You did not ask, "Is this easy?" You asked, "Is this right?" That is the power of purpose. Purpose does not remove pain. It gives pain a reason. It does not make the journey short. It makes the journey worth it. When you know why you are doing something, obstacles stop feeling like signs to quit and start feeling like tests of commitment. And here is the part most people misunderstand. Purpose is not something you find one day like a hidden treasure. It is something you define through reflection and decision. Purpose begins when you decide what matters more than comfort. It begins when you choose to stand for something, to build something, to become someone who lives with intention instead of drifting through days hoping things will somehow improve. Your life already stands for something. The question is whether it is something you chose or something you inherited. Did you choose your priorities, or did you absorb them from your environment? Did you choose your definition of success, or did you accept the one handed to you by others? Did you choose who you want to become, or did you settle into what felt safe? Unstoppable people do not accept default settings. They question the script. They decide what they are willing to give their energy to, and just as importantly, what they are willing to walk away from. Because purpose is not only about what you say yes to, it is about what you say no to. When you know why you are here, distractions lose their power. You stop chasing everything and start committing to what matters. You stop measuring yourself against everyone else and start measuring yourself against the person you said you wanted to become. And this changes everything. Your mornings change, your habits change, your standards change, not because someone told you to, but because your identity begins to align with your intention. Without purpose, people ask, "How can I get through this?" With purpose, people ask, "What is this preparing me for?" Without purpose, Failure feels final. With purpose, failure becomes feedback. Without purpose, effort feels like sacrifice. With purpose, effort feels like service to something bigger than yourself. This is why starting with purpose is not motivational. It is foundational. You can have the best strategies in the world. You can have the perfect schedule, the perfect system, the perfect plan. But if the reason behind it is weak, you will abandon it the moment it becomes inconvenient. And success is always inconvenient before it is rewarding. If you are honest with yourself, you already know this. You know which goals you set because they sounded good and which ones you set because they meant something. You know which promises to yourself you broke easily and which ones you fought to keep. The difference was never your ability, it was your reason. So before you design your year, before you chase the next result, pause and ask the question most people are afraid to ask: why does this matter to me? Not to impress others, not to prove something, and not to escape something, but because it is aligned with who you want to be. Purpose is the difference between chasing success and building a life. When your actions are guided by purpose, your confidence stops depending on outcomes. You are no longer defined by whether something works immediately. You are defined by your commitment to the direction you chose. You stop needing constant validation because you are anchored in meaning. And that is what makes you unstoppable. Not speed, not talent, not luck. Clarity. Clarity about why you wake up and what you are willing to work for even when no one is watching. In 2026, many people will set goals, fewer will define a cause, but the ones who begin with purpose will move differently. They will not panic when progress is slow, they will not quit when it gets uncomfortable, they will not be distracted by every new opportunity that pulls them away from what truly matters. They will know where they are going and, more importantly, why they are going there. And when you have that, you don't need external pressure to keep moving. You don't need constant motivation. You don't need perfect conditions. You have something stronger. You have a reason. And when your reason is clear, your path becomes powerful. That is where unstoppable begins. Most people want a better life, but very few are willing to take full responsibility for the one they have. They talk about change. They talk about dreams. They talk about what they would do if circumstances were different. But deep down, they are waiting for something outside themselves to shift first. A better opportunity, more support, the right timing, someone to believe in them. And while they wait, life keeps moving. The hardest truth you will ever face is also the most empowering one. No one is coming to take responsibility for your future, but you, not your family, not your friends, not the economy, not the past. You may not be responsible for everything that has happened to you, but you are responsible for what you allow to define you. And until you accept that, real change will always feel out of reach. Ownership is not about blame, it is about power. The moment you stop saying this happened to me and start saying this is mine to fix, everything changes. Because now you are no longer a passenger in your life, you are the driver. Most people confuse responsibility with burden. They think, if everything is my fault, then I must be broken. But responsibility is not about fault. It is about agency. It is about choosing to believe that your actions matter, that your decisions shape outcomes, that your future is not something that happens to you, but something you participate in creating. Victimhood feels comforting at first. It offers an explanation for why things are the way they are. It says it's not your fault, and sometimes that is true, but what it never offers is a solution. Ownership, on the other hand, is uncomfortable. T forces you to look in the mirror. It forces you to admit where you settled, where you avoided effort, where you chose short-term comfort over long-term growth. It forces you to accept that some of the things you wish were different are the result of decisions you made or decisions you avoided. But in that discomfort is freedom, because if your choices created your current reality, then your choices can also change it. Unstoppable people are not those with perfect pasts. They are those who refuse to let their past become an excuse for their future. They do not waste energy explaining why things are hard. They invest energy in deciding what they will do about it. They understand something most people never fully accept. You cannot control everything that happens to you, but you can control how you respond to it. And your response is what shapes your life. Every setback gives you two options. You can say, this proves I can't, or you can say, this shows me what I must. One keeps you stuck, The other moves you forward. Taking ownership means you stop negotiating with reality. You stop hoping circumstances will change before you do. You stop waiting for clarity and start creating direction. It means you stop asking, why did this happen to me? And start asking, what does this demand of me now? Because life does not respond to complaints. It responds to action. Ownership is not loud. It does not announce itself. It shows up in quiet decisions, in how you speak to yourself when no one else can hear, in whether you choose to learn from failure or hide behind it, in whether you face what is hard or distract yourself from it. Most people want credit for their intentions. Life only rewards responsibility for results. This does not mean being harsh with yourself. It means being honest with yourself. It means acknowledging where you are without excuses and committing to move forward with clarity. And here is the paradox. The moment you stop blaming, you stop feeling powerless. Blame gives your power away. Ownership takes it back. When you blame your past, your environment, your lack of resources, or other people for where you are also saying they control where you go next. And if they control your future, then no amount of motivation will save you. But when you take responsibility, even in imperfect circumstances, you reclaim authorship of your life. You stop saying, I can't, because you start saying, I will, despite the fear, despite the uncertainty, despite the mistakes. This is not about ignoring reality. It is about refusing to let reality define the limits of your effort. Unstoppable people do not deny difficulty. They simply refuse to surrender to it. They ask different questions. Not who is to blame, but what is mine to do? Not why is this unfair, but what does this require from me? Not what if I fail? But what happens if I don't take responsibility at all? Because the greatest, SK is not trying and failing. The greatest risk is never fully owning your life. Think about how many dreams end not because they were impossible, but because responsibility felt too heavy. Because it was easier to say, I didn't get the right chance, than to admit I didn't take the chances I had. Easier to say I'm not ready than to accept I am afraid. Ownership demands courage. It demands that you stand in front of your own potential and decide whether you will rise to it or retreat from it. And once you choose ownership, there is no going back, because you can no longer unsee your influence. You can no longer pretend your habits do not matter. You can no longer tell yourself that someone else will fix what you avoid. This is where true leadership begins. Not leadership over others, but leadership over yourself. Leading yourself means setting standards for how you show up, even when no one is watching. It means doing what needs to be done, not what feels comfortable. It means choosing long-term direction over short-term relief. You stop living in reaction and start living in intention. Reaction says, life is happening to me. Intention says, I am shaping what happens next. And this is the turning point. When you take ownership, you stop waiting for confidence. You build it through action. You stop waiting for motivation. You create momentum through responsibility. You stop hoping for change. You become the source of it. Your language changes. Instead of I can't, you say I will find a way. Instead of it's not my fault, you say it's my move. Instead of one day, you say today I take the next step. You do not become unstoppable by eliminating obstacles. You become unstoppable by deciding that obstacles will not decide for you. And this does not mean you will never feel doubt. You will. It does not mean you will never make mistakes. You will. But when you own your life, doubt becomes a signal to grow, not a reason to stop. Mistakes become lessons, not labels. Because you are no longer trying to protect an image of who you think you are. You are committed to becoming who you are capable of being. This is what separates those who drift from those who build. Drifting is easy. It requires no responsibility. You follow routines you never chose. You accept outcomes you never questioned. You let circumstances shape your identity. Building is hard. It requires ownership. You choose your direction. You challenge your patterns. You accept that the life you want will demand a version of you that you have not yet become. But the reward is not just success. The reward is self-respect. There is a quiet confidence that comes from knowing you are no longer running from your potential. that you are no longer outsourcing your future to luck, timing, or approval, that you are showing up as the person your life requires. In 2026, many people will talk about change. Fewer will take responsibility for it. But those who do will move differently. They will not wait for perfect conditions. They will not surrender when it gets uncomfortable. They will not explain why they cannot. They will decide how they will, because the truth is this: the moment you take full ownership of your life, you stop being at the mercy of circumstance and start becoming the author of your story. And when you own your choices, your effort, your growth, and your future, you do not need anyone else to give you permission to move forward. You already have it. Your life is yours. And what you choose to do with it begins now. Most people are taught to chase goals: bigger income, better body, higher status, more recognition. And for a moment, goals feel powerful. They give direction. They create excitement. They promise a future that feels better than today. But goals by themselves do not change who you are. They tell you where you want to go. They do not decide how you live on the way there. And that is why so many people reach a goal and still feel unsatisfied, or worse, never reach it at all, because goals are destinations. Standards are identities. You do not rise to what you want. You fall to what you tolerate. Every life is shaped not by the dreams we talk about, but by the standards we live by when no one is watching. The level of honesty you demand from yourself, the effort you consider acceptable, the excuses you allow, the discipline you practice, the respect you give your own potential. Most people say they want excellence. Few decide what excellence requires of them daily. They say they want success, but they tolerate inconsistency. They say they want growth, but they accept comfort. They say they want change, but they keep the same standards. And then they wonder why nothing is different. If 2026 is going to transform your life, it will not be because you wrote better goals. It will be because you raised your standards. Goals are what you aim for. Standards are what you live by. Goals are temporary. Standards are permanent. Anyone can want a result. Not everyone is willing to become the kind of person who consistently earns it. This is the uncomfortable truth. Your current life is the product of your current standards. Not your potential, not your intentions, your standards. What you allow in your habits, what you accept in your relationships, what you tolerate in your mindset, what you excuse in your effort. You may not like where you are, but you are there because at some level you accepted it. And that realization is not meant to shame you. It is meant to empower you. Because if your standards created your present, then your standards can also create your future. Most people wait for motivation before they change. But motivation is emotional. It rises and falls. Standards are structural. They shape your behavior even when you do not feel like showing up. When your standard is "I'll try," effort becomes optional. When your standard is "I do not miss," discipline becomes identity. When your standard is good enough, growth becomes slow. When your standard is "I do my best every day," progress becomes inevitable. Unstoppable people do not rely on willpower. They rely on who they have decided to be. They do not ask, "Do I feel like it today?" They ask, "Is this who I said I am?" This is why two people can have the same goal and achieve completely different outcomes. One hopes, the other lives by a standard. Hope says, "I want this." Standard says, "This is how I live." And life always follows how you live. Look closely at any area where you feel stuck: your health, your career, your finances, your mindset. You will not find a lack of goals. You will find a standard that is too low. You may want confidence, but tolerate negative self-talk. You may want success, but tolerate procrastination. You may want respect, but tolerate disrespect. Change does not begin with wishing for better outcomes. It begins with refusing to accept old behaviors. Raising your standards means deciding what is no longer acceptable in your life. No longer acceptable to break promises to yourself. No longer acceptable to quit when it gets uncomfortable. No longer acceptable to live below your potential. And this is where it gets difficult, because raising your standards will cost you. It will cost you comfort. It will cost you excuses. It may even cost you certain relationships, routines, and identities that no longer align with who you are becoming. But it will give you something far more valuable: self-respect. When you live by higher standards, you stop negotiating with your future. You stop making decisions based on what is easiest in the moment and start making decisions based on what is right for the person you are becoming. This is not about perfection. It is about integrity. Integrity is doing what you said you would do, even when it is inconvenient. Integrity is keeping standards when no one is applauding. Integrity is choosing growth over comfort again and again. Most people think discipline is about force. It is not. Discipline is about identity. You do what aligns with who you believe you are. If you see yourself as someone who quits when it gets hard, quitting feels normal. If you see yourself as someone who follows through, persistence feels natural. Standards shape identity. Identity shapes behavior. This is why raising your standards is more powerful than setting bigger goals, because when your identity changes, your actions follow without constant effort. You stop needing reminders to work. You stop needing motivation to improve. You stop needing pressure to show up. You show up because that is who you are. And here is the paradox. When you raise your standards, life becomes both harder and simpler. Harder because you no longer allow yourself to hide behind excuses. Simpler because decisions become clear. You no longer ask, should I do the work or should I avoid it? You already know the answer. You no longer ask, should I settle or should I push? Your standard has decided for you. You remove inner conflict by committing to a higher level of expectation for yourself. And this is where real confidence is built. Confidence is not loud. It is not arrogance. It is not pretending to be strong. Confidence is knowing that you live by principles you respect. When you keep your own standards, you begin to trust yourself. When you trust yourself, you stop needing validation from others. When you stop needing validation, you move freely. You do not become unstoppable by trying harder. You become unstoppable by refusing to live lower. And understand this, raising your standards will make some people uncomfortable. Not because you are doing something wrong, but because your growth will reflect the limits they have accepted in their own lives. When you choose excellence, you no longer blend in with average. When you choose discipline, you no longer fit into comfort. But this is the price of becoming more. You cannot live a high-standard life while keeping low-standard habits. If you want a different future, you must live differently today. Not someday, not when it is convenient. Now. This does not require dramatic change overnight. It requires deliberate consistency. It requires asking better questions. What does my future demand of me today? What behavior no longer aligns with who I want to become? What standard must I raise if I am serious about change? Every time you choose discipline over distraction, you reinforce a higher identity. Every time you choose growth over comfort, you strengthen your standard. Every time you refuse to settle, you move closer to the person you are capable of being. And over time, something powerful happens. What once felt hard becomes normal. What once felt uncomfortable becomes familiar. What once felt impossible becomes expected. Not because the world changed, but because your standards did. In 2026, many people will set goals. Some will even achieve them. But the ones who truly transform will be those who decide to live by a different code. A code of discipline, a code of ownership, a code of excellence. They will not ask, what do I want? They will ask, what do I stand for? They will not build their lives around what is easy. They will build their lives around what is meaningful. Because at the end of the day, your future will not be defined by the goals you wrote in a notebook. It will be defined by the standards you practiced in silence. You do not become extraordinary by wishing for extraordinary results. You become extraordinary by living in a way that makes ordinary excuses unacceptable. Raise your standards. Honor your potential. Refuse to live below who you are capable of becoming. And when you do that, success stops being something you chase. It becomes something that follows. Most people believe that success is about intensity, about big moments, sudden breakthroughs, about a burst of motivation that changes everything overnight. But real progress does not come from what you do once. It comes from what you do consistently. Motivation is emotional. It rises when you are inspired and disappears when you are tired, discouraged, or distracted. And because life is unpredictable, motivation will never be reliable enough to build something meaningful on its own. That is why so many people start strong and fade quickly. They wait to feel ready. They wait to feel inspired. They wait to feel confident. And while they are waiting, the habits that shape their future are being decided by comfort, not by intention. Unstoppable people do not depend on how they feel. They depend on what they have built. They build systems. A system is not exciting. It is not dramatic. It does not look impressive on the outside, but it is powerful. A system is the structure that keeps you moving when emotion fails. It is the set of daily behaviors that happen regardless of mood, weather, or circumstances. It is the routine that quietly shapes who you become. You do not rise to the level of your ambition. You fall to the level of your structure. If your progress depends on willpower, it will always be unstable. Willpower is a limited resource. It gets exhausted. It weakens under stress. It disappears when life becomes overwhelming. But structure does not ask how you feel. It simply asks what is next. Most people say they want consistency, but they design lives that make consistency difficult. They rely on memory instead of routine. They rely on motivation instead of process. They rely on inspiration instead of identity. And then they wonder why they keep starting over. Every time you start again, it is not because you lack desire. It is because you lack a system that makes progress automatic. Think about the areas of your life where you are strongest, where you are reliable, where you show up without debate. You probably do not rely on motivation there. You rely on habit, on routine, on structure that you no longer question. That is the difference between effort and excellence. Effort asks, can I push myself today? Excellence asks, what does my system require? When your behavior is guided by a system, discipline becomes less about force and more about flow. You stop negotiating with yourself. You stop making daily decisions about whether you will show up. The decision has already been made. This is why systems are more powerful than goals. Goals give you direction. Systems give you progress. A goal is a destination. A system is the road. You can know exactly where you want to go, but if you do not build a road that leads there, you will never arrive. Unstoppable. People understand that the quality of their future is determined by the quality of their daily process. They do not obsess over outcomes. They obsess over execution. They ask, what must happen every day for this to become inevitable? What behaviors, if repeated consistently, would make failure unlikely? What structure would allow me to win even on my worst days? Because the truth is simple. You will never outperform your habits. If your habits are scattered, your results will be scattered. If your habits are focused, your results will be focused. And habits do not come from motivation. They come from design. You design your environment. You design your schedule. You design what is easy and what is difficult in your life. If distraction is easier than discipline, you will choose distraction. If comfort is easier than growth, you will choose comfort. So the question is not, am I motivated enough? The question is, have I built a system that makes the right behavior easier than the wrong one? This is where most people fail. They try to fight human nature instead of working with it. They rely on self-control in environments designed for distraction. They expect consistency in lives built around chaos. Unstoppable people simplify. They remove friction from good habits. They add friction to bad ones. They reduce decisions. They make progress predictable. They do not ask, how can I try harder? They ask, how can I make this easier to sustain? Because sustainability is what creates results. Anyone can work hard for a week. Few can work steadily for a year. And the difference is not character, it is structure. Structure decides whether discipline feels like a battle or a rhythm. When you build systems, something powerful happens. You stop needing to rely on your future self to be stronger than your present self. You stop hoping you will feel more motivated tomorrow. You start acting in alignment today. Your system becomes a silent partner that carries you forward when you are tired, uncertain, or distracted. This is how average people become exceptional, not through bursts of effort, but through predictable excellence. And understand this. Systems are not restrictive. They are liberating. Without systems, every day becomes a negotiation. Should I work today? Should I rest? Should I try again tomorrow? With systems, those questions disappear. The path is already decided. You do not waste energy on whether you will ill act. You invest energy in how well you execute. This is what allows you to scale your potential. It is what allows growth to compound. Small actions, repeated consistently, do not add up. they multiply. One day of discipline changes very little. 1 year of discipline changes everything. But only if that discipline is supported by structure. This is also why many people feel overwhelmed. They aim too big without building the process to support it. They try to transform their lives with willpower instead of architecture. And when they burn out, they assume the problem is them. It is not. The problem is that they tried to build a future on motivation instead of on systems. Unstoppable people do not wait for the perfect plan. They start with a simple one and refine it through action. They do not ask for perfect conditions. They create consistent ones. They understand that success is not something you chase, it is something you engineer, and engineering requires patience. A system does not deliver instant gratification. It delivers predictable progress. And predictable progress over time becomes extraordinary. This is where long-term thinking begins. Short-term thinking asks, what will make me feel better today? Long-term thinking asks, what will make me stronger tomorrow? A system is simply long-term thinking made visible in daily behavior. You choose your inputs. You repeat them. You allow time to do what time does best, compound. And over time, what NCE felt small becomes significant. Not because you became more talented, but because you became more consistent. This is how identity is built. You do not wake up one day and suddenly become disciplined. You practice discipline through a system until it becomes who you are. You do not become focused by wishing for clarity. You become focused by designing your life around what matters. And when your identity aligns with your systems, growth becomes natural. You no longer ask, can I keep this up? You simply live the way you have chosen to live. This is the quiet power behind every meaningful transformation. Not intensity, not excitement, not hype, but structure. In 2026, many people will wait for motivation. They will wait to feel ready. They will wait for the right moment. And while they wait, their habits will quietly shape a future they did not consciously choose, but a few will decide differently. They will stop asking how to feel better and start asking how to build better. They will stop chasing results and start designing routines. They will stop relying on emotion and start relying on structure. They will build systems that win even when they are tired, systems that move them forward even when they doubt, systems that protect their priorities from their impulses. And over time, something remarkable will happen. What once required effort will become automatic. What once felt difficult will become normal. What once seemed out of reach will become expect. Not because they were special, but because they were consistent. That is how you take control of your future. Not by hoping for change, but by building a structure that makes change inevitable. You do not become unstoppable by pushing harder. You become unstoppable by building smarter. And when your systems are strong, you no longer need to rely on motivation. You have something far more powerful. You have momentum. Most people spend their lives trying to change what they do, new habits, new routines, new goals, new plans. They focus on behavior, hoping that better actions will somehow create a better future. But behavior does not exist on its own. It comes from something deeper. It comes from who you believe you are. You will never consistently act in a way that contradicts your identity. You might try for a while. You might push for a few days or weeks. But eventually, you will return to what feels true about you. If you believe you are undisciplined, discipline will always feel temporary. If you believe you are unlucky, effort will always feel pointless. If you believe you are just not that kind of person, growth will always feel foreign. This is why so many people change their actions but never change their lives. They modify habits without transforming identity. Unstoppable people do the opposite. They do not ask, what should I do? They ask, who must I become? Because when identity changes, behavior follows naturally. You do not force yourself to. Act like someone you believe you are not. You simply act in alignment with who you believe yourself to be. Effort becomes expression. Discipline becomes identity. Growth becomes normal. This is the most overlooked truth about transformation. Your future is not built by what you want to achieve, but by who you decide to be. Most people wait for proof before they change their identity. They say, once I succeed, then I will believe in myself. Once I feel confident, then I will act confident. Once I become disciplined, then I will see myself as disciplined. But identity does not follow achievement. Achievement follows identity. You must decide who you are becoming before the results appear. This is uncomfortable because it requires faith in a version of yourself that does not yet exist. It requires you to act as the person you want to be before the world has given you evidence that you can be that person. But every meaningful transformation begins with that decision. Think about the moments in your life when real change started. Not temporary effort, but lasting change. It was never when circumstances magically improved. It was when you said, "This is who I am now," not as a wish, not as a hope, as a commitment. From that moment, your choices changed, your standards changed, your relationships changed, your tolerance for mediocrity changed. Not because life became easier, but because your identity became stronger. Unstoppable people do not wait for permission to become who they are capable of being. They choose their identity and then live into it. They stop saying, "I'm trying." They start saying, I am the kind of person who shows up. I am the kind of person who follows through. I am the kind of person who chooses growth over comfort. This language is not motivational. It is directional. Because when your actions align with identity, discipline no longer feels like something you force. It feels like something you protect. You do not negotiate with your core values. You live by them. And here is the key. Identity is built through evidence. Every small action is a vote for the person you are becoming. Every decision is proof of who you believe you are. When you keep a promise to yourself, you reinforce the identity of someone who can be trusted. When you choose effort over avoidance, you reinforce the identity of someone who does not run from difficulty. When you choose consistency over convenience, you reinforce the identity of someone who is committed to growth. You do not wake up one day and suddenly become unstoppable. You become unstoppable through thousands of small choices that quietly shape how you see yourself. This is why shortcuts do not work. You cannot fake an identity you have not earned. You cannot talk your way into confidence. You cannot wish your way into discipline. Identity is built in silence, in what you do when no one is watching, in what you choose when no one is holding you accountable. Most people want the results of a strong identity without the responsibility of becoming the person who deserves them. They want the confidence without the consistency, the respect without the standards, the success without the sacrifice. But life does not reward what you want. It responds to who you are, and who you are is shaped by what you repeatedly choose. If you repeatedly choose comfort, you become someone who avoids challenge. If you repeatedly choose effort, you become someone who embraces growth. If you repeatedly choose excuses, you become someone who lives beneath potential. If you repeatedly choose ownership, you become someone who leads themselves. This is not about personality. It is about practice. Identity is not something you discover. It is something you build. And the moment you understand this, everything changes. You stop asking, "Can I do this?" You start asking, "Who would do this?" You stop asking, "Is this possible for me?" You start asking, "Is this consistent with who I am becoming?" You stop living as a spectator of your potential. You start living as its architect. This is why some people grow rapidly while others remain stuck for years. It is not because of intelligence. It is not because of opportunity. It is because some people choose to upgrade their identity while others keep negotiating with the one they already have. Unstoppable people do not cling to old versions of themselves. They do not say, "That's just how I am." They say, "That's who I was." They give themselves permission to evolve. They understand that growth is not about adding more to their lives. It is about owning more. Becoming more disciplined, becoming more intentional, becoming more aligned with their values. And that requires letting go of identities that no longer serve them, letting go of the version of themselves that avoids discomfort, letting go of the version that waits for confidence before acting, letting go of the version that settles for what is easy instead of what is meaningful. This is not loss. This is leadership of the self. You cannot create a powerful future while protecting a limited identity. At some point, you must choose between who you have been and who you could become. And that choice will feel unfamiliar. It will feel uncomfortable. It will feel uncertain, because growth always asks you to step into a version of yourself that has not yet been fully formed. But that is exactly where transformation begins. Not when you feel ready, not when you feel confident, but when you decide that you are no longer the person who waits, when you decide that you are no longer the person who settles, when you decide that you are no longer the person who breaks promises to themselves. From that moment forward, your actions will begin to align with your identity. You will not be perfect. You will not always get it right, but you will no longer be accidental. You will live with intention. And over time, something powerful will happen. What once required effort will become natural. What once felt forced will feel authentic. What once seemed impossible will feel expected, not because the world changed, but because you did. In 2026, many people will chase goals, some will achieve them. But the ones who truly transform their lives will be the ones who commit to becoming someone new, not a different person on the outside, a stronger person on the inside. They will not ask for a better year. They will become better. They will not wait for confidence. They will build it through action. They will not hope to be disciplined. They will live as someone who is, because they understand this truth. Your life will never consistently rise above your identity, but the moment you upgrade who you believe you are, everything else begins to follow. You do not become unstoppable by chasing outcomes. You become unstoppable by becoming the kind of person who creates them. And once your identity is aligned with your highest values, your greatest goals no longer feel distant, they feel inevitable because you are no longer trying to reach a better future. You are becoming the person who belongs there. The truth is, 2026 will arrive whether you are ready or not. The days will pass, the months will turn, another year will be written into your life. But what that year becomes is not decided by time, it is decided by you. You have heard the principles: purpose before pressure, ownership over excuses, standards above wishes, systems stronger than motivation, identity deeper than behavior. None of these ideas are complicated, but together they ask something profound of you. They ask you to stop drifting and start deciding, because the future you want is not created by hope, it is created by commitment. You do not need to be perfect. You do not need to have everything figured out. You do not need permission. What you need is a decision about who you are becoming and the courage to live in alignment with it. When your purpose is clear, effort has meaning. When you take ownership, your power returns. When you raise your standards, your life rises with them. When you build systems, progress becomes inevitable. When you upgrade your identity, growth becomes natural. This is how transformation actually happens, not through one big moment, but through 1,000 small choices made with intention. You will face resistance. You will feel doubt. You will be tempted to return to what is familiar. But every time you choose discipline over distraction, every time you choose growth over comfort, every time you choose responsibility over excuses, you cast a vote for the person you are becoming. And that person is stronger than your past, more capable than your fears, more powerful than your circumstances. You do not become unstoppable by waiting for confidence. You build confidence by showing up. You do not become disciplined by wishing for change. You become disciplined by living your values when it is uncomfortable. You do not transform your life by chasing results. You transform your life by becoming the kind of person who creates them. This is your moment of authorship. No one else will write this year for you. No one else will take responsibility for your potential. No one else will become the person your future demands. That work is yours, and that is not a burden, it is a gift. Because when you own your life, you no longer live by chance, you live by choice. So as you step into 2026, do not ask for an easier year. Ask for a stronger version of yourself. Do not wait for motivation. Build the structure. Do not lower your standards to fit your comfort. Raise your identity to meet your potential. You are not here to survive another year. You are here to shape it. The world does not need a perfect version of you. It needs a committed one, a person who knows why they move, who takes responsibility for how they live, who refuses to settle for less than who they are capable of becoming. This is not about becoming better than others. This is about becoming better than who you were. And when you choose purpose, ownership, standards, systems, and identity, you do not just change what you do, you change who you are. That is how you take control. That is how you crush goals. That is how you transform your life. And that is how you become unstoppable in 2026.